he was the coach of the football club that you want. You know, he's a coach, he's a leader of men. You know, unambiguous, you know, straight up and down, clear messaging, inspiring, genuinely cared. It's probably why he had the longevity in our system, in the football community that he's had 30 years. Not a lot of people do that unless you genuinely care and you're good at your craft.
He might have spent his life in football, yet we were really only just getting to know Phil Walsh, a genuinely fascinating man with a knowledge and understanding of the game matched only by his passion for it. Tonight we gather engulfed by shock and grief, felt most acutely by a family, shared by a club, and rippling out to every corner of the football community. Phil Walsh, a brilliant mind, shockingly lost.
This is not a drill. This is not a joke. This is unbelievable.
You've got some breaking news which you can give to us here on 5 to Play.
Police have just come down to confirm that the 55-year-old man who was murdered here at Somerton Park at 2 o'clock this morning was the coach of the Adelaide Crows, Phil Walsh.
We now know that Crows coach Phil Walsh has been murdered and that his 26-year-old son has been taken into custody.
I cannot remember a situation like this.
It's seriously shocking news to wake up to this morning.
There'd been an argument, and as a result of that, both Mr Walsh and his wife received the wounds. And the wounds that ultimately caused Mr Walsh's death.
The football clubs deal with tragedies regularly, there's no doubt about that, but never of this magnitude.
And just clearly beyond belief. I'm absolutely staggered. And you're right, it is going to leave a lot of people very much speechless, bewildered.
I'm in shock, I suppose, like we all are. When you're a coach of a club, you're a father figure for 40-odd lads from the age of 18 to early 30s. Those blokes will be going through a fair bit of grief at the moment.
I mean, this is something the game hasn't had to deal with previously, and this is going to be a most trying day.
Our game is in mourning today because Phil Walsh gave such a lot to our game.
A tragedy that befalls the game. It's hard to comprehend, it's hard to make sense of, and for so many it will be difficult to deal with. Mark Robinson, we gather for a story that almost beggars belief.
Yeah, it does, Jared. I mean, everyone has spoken today and everyone's had their own thoughts thinking about this, and you think, why? How? The senseless of it all. And then you think, who is this man? Why is it gone, but who was this man to people? You knew him in a little way. I knew him in a fraction, a little bit more, a little way. So many people knew him in a lot of ways. I'm not lying when I say this. You can actually fall in love with people no matter how small you know them, because that small part that person gives you makes you so happy. And I think Phil Walsh was one of those football people who, Jared, he made people happy. He made people think you're important to him. Because we think he's important to us, but when you're with his company, and I was for a brief time, he makes you important. And he's such an engaging guy. He was such an endearing guy. He was a funny guy. He was a nerd. But he loved football. And now he's been murdered, and here we are sitting here, and I don't know what else to say.
So in what spirit do we reflect one of his players and think about these young men who are dealing with trauma and grief? And he sent a note, it was for both of us. So he said, focus as much as possible on the tough, uncompromising, but unbelievingly caring and humorous person that he was, I truly believed he was going to turn me and us into an elite player and person. And I think that should be our guiding principle. I won't name the player because I don't think that would be fair, but he sent that to us and urged us that that was the spirit in which we would go. When you went over and met Phil, this much I'll tell you, he came over and spoke to me in the summer about, he was self-conscious about his public persona. He'd studied other coaches and how they went about their press conferences and how they went about their messaging. And he wanted to discuss the ideas and the possibilities. And you know what, for all that he was worried about it, all that he needed to be was himself. Because when he spoke about football, he did it in such a boyish way that it was infectious. And you think about what he's contributed to this season is the man conversation became such a touchstone for what's happening in football. It became the source of much mirth, but at its core it was very genuine. He spoke about football being Formula One driving. If you drive safe, you finish last. He spoke about football through the theatre of war, through the setup. He spoke about football through the masterpieces of art through history. When you went, it seemed to me that he was most happy when he was sharing an insight about football with you, and that's what you experienced firsthand.
And I hope I got that across when I wrote about this man. I was so excited to go and meet this person because he intrigued me. And I met him at 5 a.m. and we got out of the car and he had this big beaming smile and I'd never met him before. Hello, Robert. G'day, Phil. How are you? Call me Walshy. Okay, mate. I spent 2 hours with him, just me and him. And we spoke about football. And we got on to some issues, Jared, which we'll talk about later. But I saw in Phil Walsh a person who I thought the rest of Australia should see. Because what he did, he brought a sophisticated version of football in the modern era back to grassroots level and made it very understandable for everyone of all ages to still be in love with football.
So he was as complex a mind as there was in the game. He absolutely was troubled by the disconnect between what was happening on the field and how people would observe it. He felt he owed the game a debt, which is why he played Dangerfield on Fife, and in a way that's one of his gifts to us.
He said this game is so brutal on the players and the demands on the players were taking the game away from what he grew up believing it to be, and that's happening, and maybe that's progress. But a guy who's so comfortable and so confident at 55 in his 12 games of coaching, in his 10th game, he said, I'm going to put Dangerfield on 5. And part of the reason was for the good of the game. I mean, there hasn't been a coach who's said that before. Can I tell you, I want to tell you a story. I don't know if I've told you or not, I may have, I can't remember. When I was at the Crows for that 2 hours, he said, come around, I want to show you everything. It was like a new kid, a kid showing his new toys to me. Come, follow me. Oh, look at this. And he gave his football philosophies as we went around. No individual photos on the walls. This is a team game. You won't see any individual photos. And I noticed it everywhere I went. We finally settled in one of the coaches' rooms. And he said to me, don't you tell anyone this, but I want you to watch a pre-match speech I gave to the Crows players, not on the day of the game, the night before the game. He said, don't you tell a soul. I said, OK. And he said, promise. I said, OK, I'll promise. So being a footy nerd, I sat with him on his iPad and for 15 minutes he sat in front of his players and he spoke about not strategies or how we're going to beat the opposition by playing this certain manner. He spoke from the heart about the essence of football, about coming a time in every player's lives, that was coming tomorrow night, that you have to stand up. And you know what? He swore and he was challenging the players, and it was like football of so long ago. And I got a quote going in tomorrow's Herald Sun, Jared, which I can't repeat because there's too much swearing. But I've got ... And at the end, he said to me, how good was that? That's how he was talking to me. How good was that? And I'm sitting there going, ah. But he wasn't saying, how good was I, as in Phil Walsh. He was going, how good's footy? How good is footy? And I was buzzing. He spoke about the Civil War. Because that was, if you ask any of the players when they get an opportunity, he loved the American Civil War.
Yep.
And he kept on using that as analogies to football. And this day he spoke about the Civil War. And for him to invite me in, I wish I could have told everyone about it because I couldn't do it. But he invited me in and he allowed me to tell a lot of things about him. And he was actually at the end saying, this is my last interview for a while, I think I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. You know, because everyone was really, you know, like old Dennis Pagan, but that's who he was. And the beauty of, as you said, about Phil Walsh, and it's easy to say there's a lot of people like Phil Walsh. I know in death we put people on pedestals and all that sort of stuff, but I truly believe there were few people like Philip Walsh in football, a man who had to wait till 55 years of age, go through a playing career in 4 clubs, assisting and you know, preparing the players to get his opportunity at 55 and come in and be such a breath of fresh air. I think the entire football world embraced it.
No, he was a much-loved character after 12 games of coaching. That's how quick and how long it was after 32 years in the industry. The desperate tragedy of the day in the Adelaide suburbs this morning, and events of 2 a.m, which the club was informed at 3:30, and then the players called in early and the media confirmation at 7:15 local time. And the words sort of catch in the throat, but Phil Walsh was stabbed to death.
He was murdered. And
his 26-year-old son has been charged with that murder.
It'd be inhumane for all of us, Jared, to sit there and just say, oh, he's moved on. I cannot begin to imagine the final moments, the final minutes of what went on in that house. A person that Phil and Meredith, I call her Meredith as if I don't know. Philip and his wife brought a person into this world, and that person turns on and kills his father. It does, it happens around the country, it happens around the world, but the brutality of it and the profile of Phil Walsh makes it all the more confronting, if that's the right word. It is, and I'm sitting here today, like everyone, you've got children, people have got kids, you know, people have got parents, and you think to yourself, how does this happen? He can't be of sound mind. He just can't be. No one does that. And I'll be honest, Jared, I'm thinking, is it drugs? Is it a lot of things? And
there'll be a day for that.
There will be a day,
and that's a day in court, isn't it?
But part of that conversation I had with, which I kept going back to, Jared, part of the conversation is when I was over there, and I knew he was so, and he spoke about it consumed in football so much. I asked him, had he been a good father?
So maybe just before you elaborate, I might read the quotes back to you as they appeared in the paper. In the story, he said, asked if he was a good father, he said, that's a really hard question. The bonus of me taking the Crows job is my son is 26 and my daughter is 22, so the collateral damage isn't so big. But have I been a good father? To my son, I had a disconnect because of footy. I lost that connection and I'm trying to reconnect with my son, which I have done. In a selfish way, I taught my daughter to surf and that's my release. So when I go surfing, I take her. Now I've got my son into it as well, and that's what I should have done a long time ago. A couple of months ago, we all went surfing together at Middleton, and it was the best day I've had ever. We all got a wave, went to the bakery on the way home. We smiled and laughed. And they're haunting words today.
Yeah. Jared, I found the interview on my dictaphone, and I listened to it again, and it's eerie. It's really, really eerie. And you know, the disconnect. What was the disconnect? 10-year disconnect. It was. He said. And he said we got back together. And that was like the shining light of that little story. Hey, me and my son are fine again, you know. But I listened to him again. I was just sitting at home and I listened to him, and the tone of voice that he was speaking in, it was so honest and real and raw when he spoke about the selfishness of he was as a coach. You know, I said, when was it? When was it? Because he'd been at West Coast. And he said, no, when I was at Port Adelaide, you know. And he said, you know, I put myself ahead of the players, ahead of everything. And then the good news on that they'd found each other again, and then this happens, and the joy in his voice, Jared, which I wish I could play it now. The joy in his voice when he's talking about how they'd come back together was great, and it makes you really sad actually to think about from that sort of voice to what happened today.
He was self-aware enough, Phil Walsh, to talk to us barely a couple of weeks ago about the work-life imbalance that he'd always wrestled with and was a feature of his early days at the Crows.
Everyone who knows you and spoken to you and see you in the media, they see a guy and they think he is obsessed. Since the start of the season to now, have you made changes to your lifestyle, your life in footy, so you can fit your family and your son and daughter, go surfing with him, or has it really taken over your life?
Great question, Robbo. I had a meeting actually with the CEO and the chairman today, Andrew Fagan and Rob Chapman, who have given me terrific support, and I basically said, well, that's 10 weeks down, Walshy. You really can't keep operating this way. You've got to now try to empower a few more people and get your work-life balance in order. So I'm definitely going to try and do that in the second half of the year, Robbo.
And that was a challenge that he didn't shirk, but he was also well aware of his obsessiveness towards the job. It's a family tragedy first, then it's a football club tragedy. The coach he's the father figure. He's the mentor. He had clearly such strong relationships both up and down, but especially with the players. And it's not hard to actually put yourself in that room today, 18 to 32-year-old men, trying to absorb the shock and understand that their coach won't be back.
We have to try and imagine it. They've got to lean on each other. Tex Walker was named captain by Phil Walsh, maybe surprisingly. And Tex today, tweeting and the stuff out was just inspirational from Tex. It's guys like Walker who have to bring the club together. That's why they're leaders. That's why you're captain. Because forever now, Tex Walker is an extension of Phil Walsh. You were his only captain. So Tex will take that and run with it because he has to. He's got no other. It's like I will do it. I'll do as much as I possibly can. So it's got to come from the leaders. The younger fellas, the 21s, 22-year-olds who, I don't know what happens with them. They need their parents probably more than their football club.
That is a canny observation. So how does a football club deal with something so unprecedented? And I think the answer is just as best it can.
Everyone's going to cope in their own individual way. We've said it's important, you know, to make sure they're speaking to each other. We did ask them to stay around for a couple of hours. We thought this was a good environment to be in. We did have some history to draw upon with, obviously, Dean Bailey, our mate of a couple of years ago. Some are by themselves and they'll cope by being by themselves, but you know, it's a message I might land. Just, you know, make sure, you know, you ask each other how you're going at the end of the day, and you know, whether you're a player, coach, fan, father, mother, just talk to people.
You know, it's one of shock and disbelief, and you know, the people who are walking through the corridors of the club here are looking at each other and just shaking their head. It's a difficult one to contemplate.
You know, you've got to get straight into crisis management, and this is a crisis unprecedented. There's no rule book. and we're dealing with it.
We have to think about our supporter base here as well. Particularly some of our youngest supporters. We've got to hopefully have the mums and dads out there that can explain this situation to the youngest of our supporters. That we've had those in the club, the children of staff and players who are struggling to comprehend it. We certainly encourage our supporters to ensure they're doing their best to try and explain the tragedy that's unfolded out here today.
As I said, today we've got to get through today. We've made a conscious decision of dealing with the issue today. You're actually right, we're not going to get over it anytime soon, next week or the week after. But we've got to deal with what we've got to deal with. That's the grief today, it's the shock of this, the injustice, whatever it is, and we will think about all the other things tomorrow.
The impact that Phil Walsh has had on his club will be remembered forever. It won't ever be lost.
Rob Chapman is the chairman of the Adelaide Crows and he joins us from headquarters. Rob, our sincere condolences to you and the club, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for that, Jared. I'd like to say good to be here, but I know it's important for our fans and for the football community to hear from us today.
Perhaps a personal question first, Rob. How are you holding up?
Yeah, good. Under the circumstances. It's been a little over 12 hours since I was first contacted about this tragedy, and our first priority, we've been here since 4 o'clock this morning, was just to ensure we provide the right level of support for the right people, starting with Meredith, Phil's wife, his family, her family, and of course the players and staff, and indeed the fans and the community. So that's been our priority this afternoon.
Do you feel like you've come to grips with what's happened yet?
Look, not that we've had too many quiet moments here today, but when I do close my eyes and I think about it, I'm just still numb. Nothing can prepare you for this. It's so unexpected. It's not the call you expect at 3:30 in the morning. So look, I know I haven't come to grips with it, and I don't think I will for just a little while.
Rob, you spoke about first contact at 3:30 a.m. Can I ask you, who was that from, and what steps were put in place up until the time you told the players?
Yeah, Mark, I got a call at 3:30 a.m. From one of the assistant police commissioners who happens to be on our professional standards and integrity committee here at the club. She informed me of the tragic circumstances of which quite literally had just occurred. I spoke with our CEO, Andrew Fagan, David Noble, our head of football. Three of us met down the club. I suppose we just went into, process mode. We knew there were a lot of people that needed to hear from us directly about what had just transpired. So obviously we went to the coaches, to the players, starting with the leadership group, throughout the day staff, and of course all of the other stakeholders here. But from the moment we heard the news, our thoughts and just our actions in ensuring the right support is available to Meredith and the family first of all, but then to the players has just been our priority.
Was there an outpouring of grief from the players, or was it, I suppose, stunned at first and I suppose silence, or was there a great outpouring of grief?
I think the initial reaction from most, Mark, has just been stunned, silence, numbness, letting that sink in. Hard to give a one-size-fits-all answer on how each of the players and staff and coaches have reacted. They've all reacted in their own way. Phil has had a significant impact on our club in what's been a very short period of time, or relatively short period of time. And, he started us on a journey. Everyone's been engaged with that. And, to face up to this tragedy, has taken its toll. But we'll deal with that. And as I said, we're just going to make sure we've got the right support infrastructure around everybody, and you know, we'll deal with that. And we'll wake up in the morning and we'll have to deal with it again, and we'll just keep going through that process until everybody, you know, has been able to grieve in their own way.
Before we go on to the processes, I think this is going to be one of those moments where you're going to remember where you were when you found out. You were, I imagine, lying in bed and the phone rang. How did you cope and how did you deal with it in the moments afterwards?
Nothing good happens with a phone call after midnight, Robbo. 3:30 in the morning. You know, the name of the police person that spoke to me came up on my phone, and I knew it wasn't going to be good news, but nothing could have prepared you for what she was about to tell me. Very professional, of course. And then, you know, you have probably 2 minutes to yourself, and then you've just got to go into action. And I knew there was going to be a lot of people that needed to be told, and we've gone through the details as we understand them with everybody here, so that everybody's aware of what's happened. And there's one story, and you know, we just got to go through the grieving process. Probably tomorrow we'll get into all the secondary things like football and next steps and people and appointments and all of that. But seriously, they're questions for tomorrow.
I hope this is not too difficult a question. Everyone's got questions as to why. The mindset. If the young man was influenced in any way, has the club attempted to ask those questions of the police, or will you leave that for another day?
I think it's a question for another day, Robbo. You know, we had no insight into that. It'd probably be inappropriate, even if we did, to answer it. There is a police investigation underway, of course, and you know, there's a lot more questions than I've got answers to at the moment.
Phil had made such an imprint on the club in a short period of time, about 9 months, Rob. What did you come to learn about him, and how tight was the bond that you'd formed with him?
Tight. He does have that public persona, which was very real. You know, what Phil brought to this football club was authenticity. You know, he was the players' coach. He was everything that we wanted in a coach. But, you know, there is another side to him, and I saw that trait of genuinely caring for people come to the fore, particularly when young Brent Riley went down with his accident and trauma. Phil was at his bedside, you know, literally night and day. And I saw a side that perhaps you wouldn't see him communicate through, you know, the everyday media. He genuinely cared, and I value that trait in leadership, and he had it in spades. And that bond formed with the players was very real, and we're just starting to get sort of hints at that from Twitter and Instagram and the like from the players themselves. How do you imagine they would deal with this, Rob? He was a father figure, he was clearly a mentor, he was obviously an inspiration to them as well. He was all of that, Gerard, and more. As I said earlier, each player will have his own special moments to remember Phil by, but he was just so authentic in his conversations. He often referred to man conversations. He had them with everybody. People grew in this club, not just within the player group, as a consequence of what he had to say. We were just embarking on what we all thought was going to be just such a prosperous journey for us, and you know, it's probably just starting to sink in with the players. But I can say, it's probably important for me to say that we've already discussed that, and I know the players, in particular the leadership group, have said, look, we've got to continue that journey that Phil has started us on. So how is the most difficult question, Rob? How tomorrow does everybody front up to the realities of a season that is at its midway stage and has had the heart silenced in? Yeah, and Gerard, that is one of the questions that I don't necessarily have the right answer to, other than to say there are a lot of people giving it now some thought. first instinct this morning, look after, genuinely care for those that are important to us. We're now just sitting around with, as I said, the right people to start to canvass all of the questions that we need answers to prepare us for, another 10 rounds, 11 rounds of football. Footy's clubs are pretty resilient. We've had some recent experiences which, we'll be able to draw upon. I'm talking of Phil's best mate, Dean Bailey, of course. And we'll draw upon that. We're resilient. This is going to be real tough. It's going to be tough again tomorrow, for the rest of the week and beyond. But we know we just have to pick ourselves up too. And, I'm confident that we can. I'm confident we can.
The strengths of footy clubs, Rob, are truly remarkable sometimes. And the Dean Bailey death really rocked all of football. And it rocked, no doubt, your football club. And with the senior coach going and Phil Walsh, we're going to find out a lot about the Adelaide Crows Football Club, aren't we?
Certainly are. I found out probably what I already knew, but it's worth sharing with people. We work in a wonderful industry, boys. The comments, respect shown to us by everybody within the football community today, the condolences we've received, the messages. It's humbling, but they all care. They care for us. The other clubs, in particular Geelong, the other clubs that Phil's been involved with. This is a great industry. I'm very proud of it, and I'm very proud of all the people, the leaders that are involved in it. And we get our challenges, and we've had our challenges this week, but, this usurps all of that. This is about people. This is about real stuff. And, I'm really proud of the AFL, what it stands for, and the support it gives to people when they most need it.
So perhaps just a closing comment, Rob, is in your mind and in your heart, what did we lose today?
We lost a man that was so passionate about football. Most of us have never seen the like of it. I said before, he genuinely cared for people. That's usually a differentiator between leaders. He was bigger than just a footy coach. He was a club man, club person, and he got involved with every aspect of it. It was only, a week or so ago that the CEO and I caught up with him, and, we spoke about all aspects of the club. He had sincere interest in it, and he wanted us to be the best that we possibly could. And I reckon we made huge headway with him leading, that football side of the business over the last 8 months. And he will be sorely missed, and we've got some enormous challenges ahead of us. But we are resilient, and we will rise to meet them.
It's a goal worth aspiring to, Rob. We truly appreciate your time in the most difficult of circumstances.
No, thank you, guys.
Rob Chapman, the chairman of the Adelaide Crows. How does the footy club go on?
I can't answer that.
No.
Jared, I can only put it to life, which we all have to do. People have to learn to exist themselves in the world. I mean, you lose someone, there's great grief, and you've got to learn to find a spot in life. This football club does not have the patience for that, because it's such a demanding industry. They have to find a new coach. The players have to play at some stage. I would imagine that would be next weekend, I would imagine. And I asked them about the strength of football clubs. This is the beauty of football clubs. In great hardship, you can find great strength from people, and I thought it was a terrific response by the AFL today, which we've already spoken about, how you just rally around. That's what football clubs do. That's what good football people do.
So how did Phil Walsh come to be the coach of the Adelaide Crows? Well, it took an epiphany of different style far beyond Australian shores for him to decide that the senior coaching gig was in fact for him.
Took you a long time to decide to coach. As we saw earlier in the program, you're the oldest debut coach, and from my understanding, you're the first AFL coach to make the decision to coach in Peru. Tell us about it.
Yeah, it's been a long journey, Jared. So, unfortunately, in 2012, on a holiday in South America with my wife and son, I got hit by a school bus, and I probably wondered there whether I'd ever get back to Australia, so I probably made a little bit of a promise to myself if I ever did get the opportunity to interview for a senior coach's job, I'd take it.
So the road to Peru, the man conversations, it all came to be what we knew of the wit and wisdom of Phil Walsh, which was at its absolute best in his second last press conference late last week.
I'll sound again a bit like a weirdo, but great art comes out of a level of frustration. And not that I don't comment on the ballet like some of us in this room, but I did go, when I was in Amsterdam, I did go to Van Gogh's museum, and I'm not like I said, an art critic. There's a man with great frustration, and I looked at that painting, Sunflower, and for a bogan from Hamilton like myself, I could actually see beauty in that frustration. So although our fans are frustrated, we're frustrated, we like to think there's some masterpieces still to be painted this year.
More reason to keep sharp objects away from you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks very much. Have a good weekend wherever you are.
You had a way about him.
He has that laugh. It's a great laugh. And even at the end, have a good weekend, whatever you're doing. He just cares for people, mate.
Do you remember he told us he was reviewing his press conferences to check on his energy levels, to check on his engagement, to check on his content? That's how thorough he was.
He was.
OK, up next on this special edition of AFL 360, we'll speak with the Director of Football from Adelaide and a colleague of ours, Mark Rusciuto, as he reflects on choosing Phil Walsh for the coaching position and what we'll all miss out on as a result of this tragedy.
It's a fantastic job. It's really energised me. I love the job, but it just consumes you. It's that 10,000 hours. I've probably been in a coach's box for 20 years, so that's experience you can't buy. More importantly, I enjoy the coach's box. I love game day. That's where I think I'm at my best.
He lived his dream to be a senior coach for 12 games, Phil Walsh, and his impact won't be measured by the wins and loss that he registered along the way. The man perhaps most responsible for his ascension to the coaching of the Adelaide Crows was the Director of Football. He's a Fox Footy colleague of ours, and doubtless he's doing it tough tonight. Mark Rusciuto, thanks for your time.
G'day, boys. How are you?
The circumstances are awful, Mark. How close were you to Phil?
Look, I didn't know him for as long as what a lot of other people have in football, the people from West Coast Eagles, the people from Port Adelaide, and I didn't know him as close as what the players or the coaches or even some of the staff did at the Adelaide Football Club, but I knew him long enough to know that he hasn't reached his potential as an AFL coach, but today, it doesn't feel like it's about footy at all. We're all just so shocked here about what has happened. We can't believe it's happened, and we just feel for his wife and his daughter, his other family members and mates all over the country, because he's met a lot of people and he's had a huge influence on so many people in his personal life, but also in the footy community.
How are you rationalising it? How are you trying to make sense of it in the quiet moments?
I don't think you can, Jared. you know, there's a lot of sayings in life, but some things just don't make sense. And, you know, for the people at the Adelaide, this doesn't make sense. I just spent, 15 minutes or so talking to my kids. They were quite upset this morning. My wife said on the way to school they were hearing about it on the radio. They couldn't understand why it had happened. My son Nick said, how does a son kill his dad? It's just a horrible thought. They don't understand it, and I heard Andrew Fagan say to our CEO at the press conference today that we need the supporters, not only the Adelaide Football Club but in the footy community, to make sure they talk responsibly to their kids and make sure they do whatever they need to do to make sure they can understand it as best they can.
As a footy player yourself, Roo, what did you like most in Phil Walsh?
From the first moment I spoke to him, I could tell he's going to be a great coach. When we were looking for coaches at the Adelaide Football Club last year, I was speaking to a lot of people, and it was just kept coming back to Phil Walsh. I wasn't even speaking to some people about him, and it kept getting connected back to him, and I thought, we're going to have to try really hard to get him. And from the first day we spoke with him, he was super. You could tell he knew what he was doing. You could tell he knew a lot about footy. He'd been in the game for such a long time, and we were pretty keen on him from that moment forward. He's experienced. He knew his weaknesses. He knew his strengths. He was confident. While he probably hadn't sourced out a head coaching role, we knew that he could do the job.
What about the man's man aspect of him, Roo?
Well, he's experienced. He knows what it takes to be good. He's been at successful footy clubs. He knows you have to have tough conversations if you're going to be good. If you're going to be a leader, you need to be a man's man, and you need to, as he said, have man conversations. So he did that, and that was one of his strengths. He was honest. He was straight to the point. He had high standards. He had all the attributes of what it took to be a great coach. So it's going to be unfortunate that we don't get to find out how good he could have been.
It's funny when you listen to everyone speak about Phil Walsh. Everyone says, "Oh, he's a huge influence. He's a great motivator. He was great at this and great at that." And some people are probably sitting at home thinking, "Oh, yeah, they say that about all of them." But I really believe that there was something special, different, unique about Phil Walsh. I think Rob Chapman called him authentic, and as soon as he said that today, I thought I couldn't think of a better word to describe Phil Walsh.
Yeah, I was extremely confident that he was going to be a great coach. Even the last couple of days, I'd said it to a couple of people. We have the right team around him, we get the right players around the club, and we're going to move in the right direction. And it felt like the Adelaide Football Club has been going in the right direction this year. As frustrating as they've played at times, we knew over time that it would continue to improve and continue to go in the right direction. And when the days ahead or weeks ahead, more like days, I suppose, we've got to move on, and we've got to continue on the development that he's already put in place at the Adelaide Football Club and keep moving forward.
What do you envisage your role over the next period of time, Roo? You've got the chairman, you've got the CEO, and you've got those people there. You're the football director. You've been a footballer. You've got guys like Tex Walker, captain for 12 games, being confronted by this. What sort of role do you think you can play with the players moving forward?
Unfortunately or fortunately, I've been in a very similar situation. Back in 2003, my best mate and cousin died 3 days out from the first final against West Coast, and I was captain, and I had to steel myself and get through it and play and deal with tragedy while being a captain of a football club. So I've been through that. I've had a couple of other mates die, so I understand how tough it can be. I understand that it doesn't always make sense, but I certainly understand that you've got to move on. I can be there for leadership for these boys. I can help out a young leadership group. We have got a great leader there as a CEO, and Andrew Fagan and Rob Chapman and David Noble. We've got good people around the football club. All I can do is be a support for them, and then as a football director, probably from Monday onwards, and things are already going through my mind about what needs to be done. We'll need to do everything that we all know we've got to do, and that's find a new head coach.
Do you expect the footy club will be a difficult place for players to come to, knowing that the figurehead is not there, or will it still retain all those qualities we hear about the locker room, where it can be a great source of comfort and camaraderie in the worst of times?
Look, in the future, Jared, we'll be fine. It's going to be really tough for days and weeks ahead, but we can recover from this. There's absolutely no doubt about that. Everyone recovers from the toughest times, so the Adelaide Football Club will be no different. In fact, let's hope it makes us stronger. These sort of experiences that I've had personally made me stronger. There's no reasons why the experiences that we're going through at the Adelaide Football Club at the moment won't help us in the long run, as tough as it is at the moment. And that's what we're thinking about at the moment, and that's what we're dealing with at the moment. But in the not too distant future, these players will be they'll be better for it, although they're not thinking about that now. But I have no problem with the fact that we'll bounce back from this at all, whatsoever.
There's an absolute resolve in what you're saying, Mark, and you've alluded to there that the choosing of another coach to try to lead them on. Have you given that much consideration this afternoon?
Look, you can't control your mind sometimes, can you? So things bob into your head, but I'm not. We don't need to rush on that. We won't be rushing on that. We've got to just get everything sorted out at the moment. From what they're doing today to what they're doing tomorrow morning, to what the week looks like next week, to when the funeral will be, to who's in charge game day. There's so many decisions that need to be made day by day or minute by minute, even at the moment. So we're just like we have since 4, 5, 6 o'clock this morning. You make the most important decision you've got to make at the moment, with an eye on the future all the time as well. So everyone will be working as hard as they need to work to make the right decisions, and the footy club have done a great job so far. And I'd also like to take the time to thank the whole footy community. The messages have been unbelievable. The support's been unbelievable from all the footy clubs. From the AFL, I think what they chose to do today with putting off the game on Sunday was a very smart decision. I think it would have been irresponsible to put pressure on these lads to play this weekend. They might have been able to do it. Half of them might have been able to do, or 90% might have been able to, but I just don't think it's fair on either Adelaide or Geelong to do that. So I'm glad a sensible decision's been made, and next week against West Coast Eagles, the Crows can play, and the following week it's going to be the showdown. So the next 2 games for the Adelaide Crows are against clubs where Phil Walsh has had the biggest impact on. So it's going to be a very emotional couple of weeks. There's no doubt about that. In 2 weeks' time, the game is going to be the showdown in Adelaide, and that'll be a tough one for everyone.
My word, it will. Mark, thanks for spending some time with us, and stay strong. I know you're a good man for this spot.
No, we'll be right, and all the best to Phil Walsh's mates and his family and his wife Meredith.
Mark Rasciuto, part of the Fox footy family, a Hall of Famer and a Crows legend, reflecting on Phil Walsh and the challenges ahead. Next, the game couldn't just go on. The AFL had some difficult decisions to make, and we'll discuss those next.
You've batted away that question the last 100 times you've been asked, haven't you?
Yeah, I think I won't talk to other shows, but normally they go 3 or 4 times, so I was sort of had a pregnant pause then waiting for the follow-up question.
I know that you don't ask questions. And Jared said, I've got to try, and I said, yep, knock yourself out, but I don't think he's going to entertain it.
So we had a bet over here who was going to ask the question, and everyone said, well, Robbo's the rat bag, so he'll do it for certain. burden. And I said, nah, Robbo and I get on okay. I reckon it'll be Jared.
Rat bag.
Impossible not to laugh.
Rat bag.
Yes.
I've been telling everyone who asks me, Jared's the rat bag.
It was Phil Walsh who unlocked the secret of this show.
Oh, I've been telling everyone. I love that. I watched it again today, actually. And just the want to get involved in that conversation. It's about Patrick Dangerfield, who may leave or may not. He's getting asked all the time. And he could have jumped down your throat, but he didn't. He played along. Gave me a whack on the way through, but that's okay, because I sort of know him a little bit. He's, yeah. I told you he was funny. Did you believe me when I first told you he was funny? I did. Sat with him.
I'd seen a little bit of it, not quite as much. But the game itself and the questions surrounding should the round go ahead. Clearly the Crows couldn't play, but what of the remainder of the football round? Gillan McLachlan, after a series of, I think, imprecise meetings, what is the actual answer to this? I suspect we won't know until we live through it. This is what the AFL came up with.
We have decided that the game on Sunday between Adelaide and Geelong will not go ahead. This is a decision of the competition as a remark of respect to Phil Walsh. And it is our decision because while playing footy can be part of the grieving process, we are strongly of the view that it is not fair to ask the young men at the Adelaide Crows or the Geelong Cats to play in these circumstances. This decision has the support of the clubs and of the Players Association. The premiership points will be split between the two clubs as per the AFL rules. We know that this decision impacts on a lot of people, including supporters and fans, including those who may have travelled or intend to travel. We are working closely with all of our partners on these issues, and the AFL and club websites will keep members and supporters updated on arrangements. The remaining 7 games will go ahead from tonight. We know that the usual fun and passion of our game will not be there. We also know that our clubs, members and supporters will gather in a spirit of respectful mourning in support for the family and friends of a great football man who is loved by so many. I want to finish by again offering the deepest sympathy to the Walsh family. The thoughts of the whole football family are with you today and in the difficult days ahead. Thank you.
So into a period of respectful mourning where at the games there won't be banners, there won't be theme songs as teams run out into the ground. So players will emerge together in a show of solidarity and camaraderie, and the difficulty will be, how do we barrack? How do we call? Sport is not all there is right now.
No, it's not. But he loved footy, mate. He'll want people to cheer. That's what people did at footy games. And it won't just be at AFL games, mate. I don't know, but I'm having a guess here. I reckon suburban and country football leagues, they'll have their little moment. They will. I don't know what it'll be, but they'll have a minute silence or they'll acknowledge Phil Walsh in some way. And that's, again, the beauty of football.
So these were the special editions of the papers that were put out at lunchtime today, the Adelaide Advertiser and the Herald Sun, documenting one of the most desperate days that football has ever known. Perhaps the closing word might belong to his best player, Patrick Dangerfield, who voiced his thoughts through social media today. Words cannot express the sorrow and disbelief. What Phil Walsh has done for our football club in such a short period of time is truly astonishing. Elite standards on and off the field. Phil led and we followed. His standards and philosophies will forever guide all those who knew him. I feel blessed to have known Phil Walsh, and I'm a better person because of him. R.I.P. Walshy. We fly as one. And that's a sentiment I think that everybody in football would share in, and it's no form of consolation or solace, but the imprint that he's left is lasting.
Yes, it is. It is. I think there's not much more else can be said, mate.
So to the footy next at the MCG with that spirit of respectful mourning. What would have been such an exciting night as the game in the rounds. Collingwood and Hawthorn resume season 2015.